This is Swarfcast. I'm Noah Graff. I was listening to your podcast, trying to prepare, and I saw something about pricing. You actually did a whole series about pricing work, and this is something, as you know, in our experience so far of selling companies, the buyer says before they're buying it, I'm going to raise prices, and this is one of the ways I'm going to, improve the profitability. And I mean, us on the outside, we go, yeah, duh, that sounds great. You clearly know what you're talking about. I'm not in the position, to know exactly, because the machinery business is just, I mean, it's a whole nother world, and it isn't. So let's just go over some of the things. How do you look at the prices you have on parts, and then deciding whether to, whether you want to raise prices or even lower prices? And I know you have experience doing, very small runs. Our customers are doing, some of them are doing small things, but a lot of them are doing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of parts. It's probably pretty much the same with figuring out the pricing for the stuff, or isn't it?
Well, I like to say the right price is the price that someone will pay for your parts. And as the volumes go up, the competition goes up, it becomes more monetized. I like competition. It's one of the reasons I started Rapid is there was no competition for prototype sheet metal parts in the beginning, really. And there's a spectrum there. The
You said you do
no,
like
I
competition, or you
don't
don't
like
like competition?
competition. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You want to be in a
But let's
category of
say
one.
whether you have competition or not, I have a theory that I explain, which hopefully someday I'll write up a little white paper for paperless parts called what I call the pricing triangle, and I'll try to describe it visually, though it would be much better. Think of a XY graph, and on the vertical line is the price, on the horizontal line is the number of RFQs or the parts that can be made, and you have a triangle. And the think of the letter A, and you have that bridge in the middle of it. Um, that bridge is your capacity. So at a
Okay.
certain price, it will touch the two sides of the triangle, and that's sort of perfect. You are using all of your capacity. If you price the parts too high, then you're going up on the vertical axis. You're not going to get enough orders to meet your capacity. Um, you've got excess capacity. If you price too low, there's a gap between that horizontal line on the A and sides, and that's you don't have enough capacity to meet the orders that come in. So,
Okay.
um, so you let's say you have though that bridge line, your capacity, um, and you want to raise prices. Well, what you have to do, at least the way I look at it, is you have to create more demand. So you have to broaden the base of the triangle so that when you raise that, instead of extending out the sides of the triangle has broadened enough to meet your capacity. So you really put a lot of effort into sales and marketing, and that's my forte.
Mm.
And what I did a lot at Rapid is we were a marketing machine. Yeah, that
Right. And you were a manufacturer's rep,
at one
and
point, yeah, yeah.
so
So it's
I
yeah, so
Yeah, go on.
it's what you want to do is you want to match your capacity to the price. And if you want to raise prices, you better create more demand. And in manufacturing, it's
Yeah.
actually a lot easier than a lot of other industries because many shops don't have salespeople, or the salespeople are inside, or they don't spend a lot of money on marketing. And you look at websites of some shops, and the last update was maybe 10 years ago. There's a lot of opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to sell and market in the fruits making world, and that will drive an increase in RFQs. You better have your estimating process ready to handle more, which is what we were good at Rapid, and what Paperless Parts excels at. Thing you do though, now your win rate goes down. However, your profitability is going to go up because you're getting more for the parts. What we did at Rapid though is we were constantly raising prices. We were also adding more capacity. So we add the capacity to finance the growth. It wasn't like that was all our EBITDA didn't keep going up and up and up. It pretty much stayed 20 to 22%. However, it allowed us to buy more equipment, hire more people, expand our facilities, and in essence, over time, increase the value of the company. Um, What we did is a combination of raising the prices and expanding the capacity, and we keep broadening the base of the triangle to create more demand.
What about getting more out of your capacity? Just figuring out better
Yeah,
processes.
yeah,
How
that's a way of it.
was that as powerful? Was that as powerful as buying more machines?
It's sort of like looking at you if you have a fixed income and you want more money to save, you have to cut your expenses. You can only cut your expenses so much. You can only improve your internal manufacturing capacity so much. If you if you want more income to save, you really need to add add more earnings,
Right.
and you need to add more equipment and facilities and people, because you can only become so efficient. And yeah, we did that. We did our best there. Um, our goal though really, and this was part of the fun part of Rapid. Our goal wasn't to increase our efficiency to get excess capacity. Ours was we had to keep delivering parts to people in this 1 to 2 weeks, and we took expedites. This is something that a lot of shops don't want to do. They don't want to get paid for making parts faster when a customer wants them. We had a formal process, and we could turn parts around.
Nice.
It was right there on the quote. The standard lead time was 7 business days for sheet metal parts. If you wanted it 5 days, it was a 25% adder. 4 days, 50% adder. 3 days, 75% adder. And then after that,
That's pretty cool. And so people don't do many
oh
people
yeah,
do that? Or more people do that now with
we
paperless
make it
parts
really
or
easy with paperless parts. And see, one of the things that it does is it empowers the customer to make that decision. And you don't have to have a conversation. Again, if you think about efficiency, if you have to call or email or whatever back and forth between the customer and the shop, you created all this friction. Um, I have a phrase I used to tell people, we want to create a frictionless business environment. And
hmm
our ideal customer was one who emailed in an RFQ, or even better, used our SolidWorks app. We sent back a quote, they sent back an order, we made the parts and shipped them, and we never talked to them. And
Interesting. See, that's the opposite of the machinery business because then you don't get the
yeah,
serendipity when you're just emailing and boom, boom, boom business. Now you're way more efficient, but you never know if you called them on the phone, they might want some other part
well,
too.
what our estimating software allowed us to do is it took out the rote and gave us more time for value add. And there were enough RFQs that came in. For example, let's say there was something that we couldn't do that we would no quote. We call the customer because we now had time and maybe figure out with them. They didn't need it to be this material. They could substitute that. Now you can have those serendipitous conversations because you've created the time. I said our ideal customer was like that.
Because
Yeah,
the other
let's say
stuff, yeah.
80%. It would have been great for Pareto's law. 80% of the orders we never talked to anybody, but the other 20% of things we did, and and it still blew my mind at the end. We were one company, Rapid Sheet Metal, Rapid Machine. We called ourselves Rapid, and our salespeople would call somebody who was buying machine parts and say, "Yeah, we do sheet metal parts," and they'd go, "Really?" And like, what do we have to do to make you aware of this? Those conversations, as you
Do
say,
you,
have to happen for the serendipity to rear its head.
do you feel like because you had the name Rapid, it planted something in the culture, in the
Oh,
people's
absolutely.
minds that just added that
Yeah,
little
yeah.
subconscious
Our
energy.
tagline was "We manufacture time."
Manufacture time, right? Because time is the only thing you
Yeah,
can't
we
replace.
manufacture time.
The only
And
thing.
you know what the other thing is just that was funny that I learned is um, if you keep people really busy, they bitch less.
Hmm.
And we had a always had a lot going on in the shops, and um, yeah, people were busy.
Unless they feel like they're overworked and they don't have time and they get
Yeah,
frustrated by
we
that.
and that happened at times, and we had a lot of mechanisms for communication in the shop, and we went overboard on it, and still, when we did team member feedback, uh, they would always ask for more communication, and like, I not, unless I was standing next to you every day, I don't know what else I could do.
One thing I find interesting about the parts making parts business is that if material cost goes up, you're basically allowed to go to your customer, or it's standard to go to the customer and say, "I'm sorry, material prices have gone up. I'm
Hmm.
charging you more." And it's kind of like, I don't know, is there haggling, or is it usually pretty smooth when that happens?
It ends the shop will get burnt once by it before they make sure that that's a clause in the contracts, and particularly for
Ah,
long-term agreements. And it does happen, and the OEMs don't necessarily like that because they want a predictable cost. However, you need your shop to be in business to survive. And if you're uh, not giving them the pricing relief, they
is
aren't going to be able to keep making the investments to be a good supplier for you.
is there ever a time where you know you just you could charge a ton for a customer, um, because you can make it, you know, in a tenth of the time as somebody else because you have different equipment or different
Oh yeah.
processes. Say you have a multi spindle, okay? Is there ever a time where you you don't want to take as much as the market can give you because maybe they'd find out about it, or maybe, I don't know, people have said in other interviews, you don't want to gouge the customer. um I suppose part of it is the long
Well,
game, right, versus the short game.
we had, as I said, we had pretty standard formulas on if you needed the parts faster, what it would be.
Right.
And yeah, I could see that if you weren't as transparent with your quicker term pricing and let's say,
So is the customer is allowed to know what your
no,
cost is
no,
to
no,
make the part?
no,
Is that how it
absolutely
works?
not. However, if you're putting a quote out there and they say they want the part in a day and we quoted $1,000 and we charged them $10,000, that'd be gouging. Yeah. If we charged them $2,500, I can justify that. And we actually got scripts developed to through that with the customers, what we had to do. We were running, let's say, this is part of why I love doing what I was doing. We were running 24/7 at Rapid, 3 shifts, and even Saturdays and Sundays in different aspects. Um, we could turn stuff around. The ability, though, what we said is we never want to say no to a customer request to turn around a part time wise, and to do that.
Never wanted to say no because of the time
Right, if they said
request.
we need a part in 24 hours, we literally had customers who would send someone on a plane to Boston and drive up, pick up parts, and get back on the plane and back with them the same day. Yeah, that's how badly they needed the
Right.
parts. Um, we didn't gouge them. We were expensive. Um, it was reasonable within our realm.
Right. Right. Um, and I'm sure you had a lot of times where you said no, right?
Uh, there
It's
weren't
just,
many. There weren't many. We were if it if it wasn't feasibly possible with the hours, yes, but we would share that. We'd say it's we would tell them exactly what we did need, and we had a one of our core values was under promise over deliver, and that was
hmm it seems pretty hard with what you
not
were
really.
promising.
It got embedded in the culture because it was part of what I would talk about in that lunch with Jay. Everybody knew is that I would rather tell you 3 days and come in at two. Let's say you say tell me absolutely positively I need 2 days. And
Uh,
I'm like, listen, I can't promise you the 2 days. I'll promise you 3 days because if you promise them two and you miss for whatever reason, you scrap the parts and maybe 95% of the time you're not going to scrap the parts, but it does happen. And if you don't hit the 2 days, then you're the goat. Um, They're rightfully pissed off at you. If you promise 3 days and everything goes right and you ship it so they get it in 2 days, then you're a hero. So
yeah. And if you're a hero, boy, they're going to come
yes,
back no
yeah.
matter
So
what the
under
price.
promise, over deliver.
Um, sure. So we got under promise, over deliver. We got build your capacity um, to keep up with your demand that you get
Mhm.
from sales. Um, are there any other factors? I think I heard in your podcast you were talking about um, payment, how that can affect pricing. That's
Um,
another trick,
when you
right?
automate your estimating, you can create formulas that can be really, really, I don't necessarily want to use the word complex, but could have a lot of factors. And one of the things that you can do is have a multiplier on your price based upon how companies pay you. So what I like to use as an
Mm-hmm.
example is you use a standard payment of 30 days as there's no multiplier. You multiply the price by one. Um, let's say though that for 45 days you multiply it by 1.01. You add a 1% cost of money for the extra 15 days. For 60 days you add a
Mm-hmm.
1.02. You're getting a 2% adder. If they're like GE and they pay in 90 plus days, I put on a 5% adder. And
What about if they pay right away? Do you have something in
nobody
that
pays right
equation?
away. When interest rates were low, we would give a 1% discount. Um, if you
I think I've got a guy I interviewed. He's brilliant. Um, he's this Mennonite guy. His name is Jay Souter, and I'm pretty sure he he had a significant discount if he got paid
we
right
had really
away.
good cash flow, so I didn't
But
care. Um, and
right,
so here's the other thing on payment. Credit card processing costs you 2.5%. And if you weren't approved for terms, I added 2.5% onto your price for the credit card processing. I wasn't going to eat that. Now I,
yeah, I guess when you're doing one-offs, you could
yeah.
do credit card. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking
And one of
about
the other
that.
things we did is we automated the credit checking for customers. We were integrated into the DMB Bradstreet. database, so our customer service people could instantly approve a new customer if we needed to. Th- These are
Very
these are
interesting.
all the little things.
Anything else about pricing? Anything else? Anything else people might not know about what they can do so
So
they
I'll
can raise prices or lower
well, I'll share.
prices if they're
Yeah,
buyer?
I
Because you're a student of negotiation, and this is definitely way different from machinery dealing. Where I mean, that's like dark arts of something could be 50 or
sure.
30 or whatever. It's how we
Yeah,
eat.
yeah. The one thing that we did is we had different shop rates for different complexity parts in the machine world. So we had what they called simple, medium, high complexity, and we had different hourly rates. And now the hourly rates aren't say real rates, and these are approximations. However, we were uh, towards the end, say we were for simple parts, we were roughly $200 an hour. For medium complexity parts, we were $300 an hour. High complexity parts, things that uh, require certain machines, certain people in the shop. Essentially, they could blow up your shop, these types of parts, if there's too many of them. Um, we
Mm-hmm.
only wanted, and I forget whether it was 5% of hours or 5% of revenue. However, I think it was hours. We really managed, and we would not go over 5%. And we used price as a throttle so that we would never go over 5%. And if we were under, we were fine.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of customers who give you some parts you just don't want to do. And I say, fine, I'll do them. However, this is the price. And we were up over $800 an hour on the complex parts at the end. We keep raising the price.
And what would your cost be on something
It's
like
hard to
that?
tell because how do you might have a machinist who's doing it who's $10 more than the other guy, but what's the opportunity cost? And, how many simple parts could he whip out in the same, as opposed to a less experienced operator or setup person? It's what we just
Okay.
said is make it worth our while. We're capping it at 5% of, say, hours, and the dollars per hour really didn't reflect the costs or profit margin or anything like that. It was we used price to throttle demand.
That makes sense.
So
I mean,
and
that makes
and
total
and I think
sense.
you asked about price. So I think people get stuck that price has to stay the same regardless of the demand, regardless of the season. And there is definitely seasonality, and definitely there's periods of price increases, or more
Yeah.
demand than capacity in the machining world. And I think a lot of shops are afraid to raise their prices. I think you need to be really fluid because when prices go down, when there is less demand, buyers are going to be pitting you against the other shops, and you may get less money.
Right.
You might have to sharpen your pencil. However, there's a lot of hesitation of shops to when when there is a lot of demand to really bring the pricing up to meet that demand, to essentially make on that pricing triangle example your capacity meet your demand.
Is there more hesitation to do that or than to bring it down
I think the
to get the
customers
job?
force you to bring it down. Uh,
Or the customer could just go
right. Well,
go
that's
to
what I mean.
somebody else
You
though.
if you don't bring it down, you're going to lose business in one way or another.
But I mean, the question is, will the customer just go to somebody else without even
Well,
asking first, or is that
they
not
always
really
get a
how it
quote from
works?
you, and if
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
give a plug for paperless, if you're using paperless as opposed to doing it by spreadsheet or your ERP system, you're going to have more time to have conversations to find out how your price looks. You're going to be able to get the quote back faster, and have,
That's an interesting irony there. It's you get it back faster, automated, so then you have
yeah,
time for the conversation.
yeah.
That, that that's really interesting. Um, Man, this is how. Just a couple more questions. We talked about how you're into Chris
Mhm.
Voss, writer of the negotiation book, Never Split the Difference. I think it's genius. Um, so you can imagine how I would use it in the machinery business. How how are you like? Why are you taking this? You said you're in a mastermind group, or
I'm in an
you're just
entrepreneurial
taking
coaching group. Yeah.
you're okay. Um, how are you applying or going to apply the negotiation techniques you've learned in there? Um,
Look at it as there's certainly applications in business. However, there's a lot of personal interactions, and if you if
oh,
you
absolutely.
think about some of the underlying themes, what using Chris's techniques does is makes the other person feel better about the negotiation. And if someone feels
Hmm.
better about the negotiation with you, then they are more likely to interact with you in the future. And there's so much power in that, whether in business or personally. I think it makes you a better communicator and probably a better human.
Interesting. If people are interested in learning more about Chris Voss, episode 80 and 81
Mm,
of the show, we go into that. But you know, I remember listening to his, in when I interviewed him, and then when you did your show about pricing, you guys mentioned never leaving money
mhm.
on the table. They both said that, and what I've learned, I've made some mistakes. Sometimes never leaving or trying to never leave money on the table leaves money on the table in the long run.
Yeah,
So you have to be
yeah.
careful. Um, Tell me when serendipity has played a big role in your life. I know you've talked about that. Just one thing, either recently or just comes to mind. Man, serendipity just this changed my life.
Well, I didn't use the word serendipity. I think of it more placing yourself in the path of luck. And
Yes.
the no specific example is coming to mind, Noah. However, on one of my cars, I have a license plate that says B first, BE first, and it comes from a podcast that I heard with Gabrielle Reese, the former Olympic volleyball player for the U.S. And she was moved
Huh.
to Malibu with her husband, Laird Hamilton, the surfer. She would go to the grocery store, and Gabrielle, she's beautiful, she's accomplished, she's married to this amazing guy, and she'd go in the grocery store, and all these women would being snobs and wouldn't say hi to her and stuck up. And she had to
Because she was
well, this
famous,
is where
or
the story goes, is she all of a sudden had that epiphany that they were intimidated and that even though these women were highly successful in many ways in their own lives, Gabby intimidated them. So she reached out first. She started smiling, she started saying hello, and then all of a sudden the world changed. These women started talking to her. She made a lot of friends. And that's philosophy of hers now is be first. And I think a lot of
brilliant.
great things start um, have started for myself by being first, by initiating conversations, initiating, reaching out to someone, even when it was uncomfortable. And, perhaps you can relate to this. There may be a podcast guest that you would really like to have on. You're uncomfortable reaching out because they're sort of intimidating. And one of the reasons you want to have them on. So it's a reminder to myself when I look at that car plate on it is to be first. Don't be scared of being rejected. And there's wonderful doors that open by initiating.
Wow, that is so interesting. You hear things one way, you hear things another way, and that the way you just said that is it's definitely gonna stick with me. I try to do that.
Well,
Sometimes I do it, sometimes I
I,
don't.
I guess I'm a
You
believer
know,
in creating my own serendipity, and I think you are in the ways that you approach it. Yeah,
I'm trying,
it you can sit
trying,
back
but
and wait for it to happen. However, it's a lot more likely to happen if you do something about it.
now it definitely seems like you've
Yeah.
just gone for it. Um,
I'll give you, here's an example that's changed something, Noah. I'm sitting here in a building in Rye, New Hampshire called Airfield Place. And I moved to the seacoast, New Hampshire, 2020. One of the things that I like to do is pretty physically active, and I like to have goals. And one of those is being nationally competitive in the 400-meter sprint. So running once around a football field. And they actually have
really,
races uh, for call us seniors. Um, and I drove by this building, and it's pretty large. I said, I wonder if they would let me run inside in the winter because track's covered with snow, it's cold. And lo and behold, I reached out and the building was for sale. Bottom line is I ended up buying the building. I put in it's a 65,000 square foot fitness
this was after you sold your company.
after I sold the company. Yeah. 65,000 square foot fitness and wellness facility. I have leased some space to some really world-class operators, a gym, the 6 indoor pickleball courts, real high-end physical therapy, healthy food cafe, where after this I'm going to go down and either grab a smoothie or some sort of a salad with protein. We're going to be putting in yoga, Pilates bar, some movement classes, putting in I'm going to own this business, a recovery business with cold plunges and saunas and red light therapy and biocharger, things like that. It all happened because if you want to call it serendipity that the building was for sale, but if I hadn't reached out, I mean, it wasn't advertised on the building or anything. I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, you tried. I call it also. I have a coach, and one of the things it's called following your nudges.
Mm.
Like just um, it sounds like that's something that you has really served you well. Is there anything else you would like to say to the people of the world? We wrap this up. I think you've
Uh,
said a lot of awesome things. So, I mean,
So
if you want to just say enough said, then
I'm,
that's
I'm going
great.
to reinforce what we
Drop the mic.
I'm going to reinforce what we talked about before. I I love pricing. Pricing fascinates me, and I really encourage someone who has the power to change prices, controls pricing, and is probably a shop owner, is do some experiments. If maybe don't change your pricing wholesale, maybe a new customer comes in, raise your shop rate 25%. Try try some stuff, see what happens. Um, and you could look at it as this is selfish. The shop owner is going to make all this money at the expense of somebody else. But I know shop owners, and they want to invest in equipment, people, and facilities, and that's what this American Renaissance in manufacturing is going to need to be able to meet the demand of companies buying our products. We need to increase capacity by a lot. And to do that, we
Hmm.
need to make money as parts manufacturers. And that's going to happen by raising prices. And it's not going in our pockets. We're not buying yachts, you know, Bugattis. It is, in most cases, it's going back into the shops or the bulk of it. And so I really encourage someone listening. It's like if you want to fuel the growth of your company, it starts by raising prices. Don't be afraid. Take little experiments and yeah, see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, and that kind of goes back to the be first,
Although if you are selling
give it a,
used machinery, you should definitely, you know, be as thin as possible so that these shop owners can bring more equipment in, Noah.
that's true. But that would then put us out of business.
That's exactly. Then you
And
wouldn't be around for them to buy the next piece of used
they need
machinery.
the whole
Yes.
ecosystem, right?
Yes. Obviously,
Like
I'm saying it in jest. It's you need.
even if you don't like mosquitoes, they need to be there for
Yeah.
the ecosystem. I prefer not to think of myself as a mosquito, but
Yeah.
um,
It's you need to
yeah,
make a living and make it worth your while. Otherwise, you'll disappear and the marketplace will be less competitive for used machinery.
yeah. And the question is, of course, everybody asks, well, what is making a living? And people are coming from different perspectives. Like you sell to an automotive company, and they say, well, we're negotiating over 1 cent, and you're trying to make $50,000 or whatever. They don't know what we're trying to make, but I mean, like, you know, it that's what makes it interesting too. There's that disconnect, but I really, I really like that send off. I think um, it seems like you're an experimenter, and the be first thing goes with it, and I can see how that's really served you well. And I'm so glad that we got to know each other and are on both people's podcasts. I'm going to probably ask you to let me be on run your podcast if you'll do it, because I thought everybody, just so you know, Jay did an amazing interview with me today. I don't know when it's coming out, but
Hopefully September
the
of
the Job
2023.
Shop podcast, yeah, Job Shop podcast. It's good, and I think you're going to really like the one I'm on.